Hello guys, my name is SVB and I'm back with another video. Today I'm going to be doing a map guide for the newest map in our Overwatch roster, and that is Busan. So without further ado, let's kick right into it, guys. So Busan is a control point map, also known as King of the Hill amongst the community. And the first map that we're going to be looking at is called Sanctuary. Now this is quite an interesting one. It's probably the most open of the 3 points. And we're just going to talk through each of the routes you can go. As you come out of spawn, there's 3 routes you can take as either side of the attackers. You can go left, you can go straight down the middle, straight under point, or you can go all the way around the right. Now I'm just going to take a second to talk through why you go through each of these points and what each of their benefits are for each of these lanes. So the reason why you'd go to the right side is perhaps the most simple and obvious. The right side is very narrow and choky, meaning that this really favors Rhine heavy, shield heavy, fat comps like a Goats, or any sort of triple tank, even a Rhine Zarya. This is the side you want to go because it's narrow, it's got not very long sight lines, meaning that you can't be exploited for your lack of range. And if you're a comp that wants to brawl at short range, then this is the area you want to go. Now going straight down the middle, that's the quickest route to point. So you would take this route if you wanna build a comp that essentially wants to take control of the point quickly before it's capped, and then make it hard for the enemy team to try and get back on. And I'll talk through what maybe potential comps you might want to run. And down the left is perhaps the most elusive side. This is the route you'd want to take if you really don't want to fight. If you really want to exploit the sight lines, this is by far the longest sight lines. You can see here a Widowmaker, some sort of long distance hero would be perfect in this kind of spot. So this is the side you want to take if you don't want to fight. Now, what are the comps you want to run on this point? So I did spell out there on the right side, you can go with the Goats, tank heavy comp. But the problem with a tank heavy comp on this map is, like I said, on the left side or right side, depending on which side you're facing. But in this scenario, it's the left side. Let's say you come on the point with a shield heavy comp from the right hand side, and you want to set up on point, try and take some angles. Now there's a lot of good natural cover provided by our friend the turtle. But the problem with this kind of shield heavy comp is that there's so many angles for an enemy team to potentially take once you're boxed into this tiny open square. And just for example, let's say you are set up here. Now an enemy team can have a sideline this way, they can send someone to come this way, send someone to come this way, and they can even send someone to come all the way around. Now on most control points, the physical control point is usually covered and has some protection inside. But what's different about Busan is that there's absolutely no cover on the point. Every angle is exposed, there's no side or area that's blocked off from cover. Because, for example, if you think about Nepal or you think about Lijiang Tower, quite often there'll only be 2 sides to come from, meaning it's much easier for a Reinhardt to hold his shield in one area and block the other, and then you face the other side. But on Sanctuary, a shield heavy comp can be really easily exploited because there's so many angles, so many windows for you to shoot from. So if you do want to run a shield heavy comp, I wouldn't really recommend it on Sanctuary, but you will absolutely need a Lucio. Because the minute the enemy starts flanking around, you need to speed onto them. And on the flip side, I would actually recommend going dive on Sanctuary, for the reasons that I just stated, that there's so many angles for you to exploit. Let's say you run a Winston, you run a Diva, you run a Hammond. It's very easy for you to jump around, take all the space you want. And there's lots of space for you to disengage as well. Say you walk in, as a Winston, I'd recommend, say you're walking down main, you walk on the point, you poke them a little bit if they're here. There's so many areas for you to jump and hide to that your life as Winston would be really, really easy. So again, long sight lines, lot of windows to go from. So the kind of ideal comps on this point would be, again, the heroes with the long range, your soldiers, your Widowmakers. Since it is so open, the teams that are fighting are usually very split around. There might be like a healer here, another healer here, a couple of people fighting here. So someone like a Sombra, someone like a Tracer can really easily exploit all these flank angles that you have. Easily come in, sneak up on someone, hack them, one-clip them, whatever it is. And just a little tip, a great stalling tool is actually sitting on top of this drum here. So you will quite often get into games where maybe a Lucio or a Hammond has just found their way up here. And the enemy team is usually quite unlikely to look upstairs. So this is a nice little stall area, and also you can wall ride around these edges as a Lucio. So just a little trick. If you find your team down and you just need to stall for as long as you can, try and get on top of that drum and beat it like Michael Jackson. Now moving on to the next point, known as downtown. It's the only place you can come to find a bit of karaoke in the world of Overwatch. If you pick Reinhardt, you can get your groove on. Now downtown is kind of halfway between the other two maps of Busan, in that it's not so open as Sanctuary, but it's not as closed as MEKA Base, which we'll get to after this. And that means that you can kind of run everything on this point and get away with it. So on downtown, you have two options of where to go. If you're coming from spawn, you can go down main, or you can go down this side. Now again, let's talk about why you would choose either side. So going down the left is the covered route. You're gonna be hidden. There's no chance of you getting hit from enemy fire. So again, if you pick a fat shield heavy comp, a goats or any sort of Reinhardt comp, it's much better to go down the left, get straight on the point, and get yourself in a nice tidy position to brawl. Now, if you've got a more long range comp, then this is the route you want to go. Now on this map, you will quite often see Widowmaker, and that's for this exact spot here, because this is great territory for Widowmaker. She gets up top here, and she can essentially look down on the entire point. She can look at the point, she can look at the spawning area where the enemy is coming from, or she can just look at where everybody's roaming around here in this main bit. So a good Widowmaker on the high ground here can be very, very oppressive. And in those scenarios, you really kind of either want an opposing Widowmaker to contest her, or you have to go for a dive comp with a Winston, Diva, Genji, that type of heroes. Get up top and dislodge her. Now, say you are encountered with a Widowmaker or an Ashe who's kind of beating down on you from this high ground, and you don't want to pick dive for whatever reason, or you can't make it work, and you can't counter snipe. Then the alternative is, like I said, go fat and go on point. So let's just explore that route. So say you pick a Reinhardt comp, you want to go down this side. Now the good thing about this is that unlike on Sanctuary, there is lots of natural cover and there are angles that you can hide from. So once you get settled on the point with your Reinhardt comp, once you've taken control of this area, all you have to do is really sit in this little turtle area. This hut is great natural cover because you can see there's no way to be flanked from above. The sides are covered. So if you can turtle up in here, this is nice and cozy as a Reinhardt. And there's not a lot of great angles for someone like a Widowmaker to take, because the best you can do is sit up here or sit up top on the other side. And those aren't really great angles because those are within the range of a Diva, for example, to just fly up and start pew-pewing her. Now you can go to this side, but I wouldn't recommend it. One, just for the boops. You can easily get booped off the edge. And also, it doesn't allow you to actually touch the point quite as easily. Meaning you're going to quite often get split apart if you try and take a Reinhardt comp and then come out here. But you'll also notice that this is a map with little to no ceilings, which is why a Pharah pick is great. Because you can really kind of fly around, and the whole map is kind of your domain. You can kind of peek off this side angle here, say you wanted to fight on point. Or alternatively, you go all the way around downtown to where the Widowmaker was, and say the enemy doesn't have a Widowmaker. Again, you have lots of free reign. You can pretty much see the entirety of the map, and just rain down rockets with the Pharah Mercy comp. Now this high ground here, it's quite good, but it's not really oppressive. As I talked about, once you get turtle on there, there's not a lot of great angles for the hit scan or the Widow or the Ana, whoever's up here. So if you go for a Rein comp, go down the sides, get onto point quickly, and brawl in this area. Once you get control of the point, you really want to hold this angle here. You see this Reinhardt shield can pretty much cover this. So you just poke out from here, your team can sit up behind you, shooting through your shield, and the minute your shield gets pressured, you go back under cover. Bob's your uncle. Did the enemy decide to flank? Again, it's quite easy. You just shift your shield to here, or you can shift your shield to here, but again, this is boopable, so I wouldn't recommend this. But right here is pretty cozy. You can even push up if your team is coordinated enough right to this point here to block any entry at all. Generally, getting control of this point early with the shield heavy comp makes your life very easy. If you lose control, then you really have to kind of rush in with a Lucio and try and out-brawl the enemy team. Now, if you go with a Winston dive, your options are much more grand in that sense. You have a lot more ideas you can go through. If you do go with the dive comp, this area will a lot more likely be where you brawl it out. Just because it's a lot more open area, you can jump a lot easier. A Winston jumping here is likely to hit a ceiling, same for a Diva, same for a Genji. Whereas in this area you kind of have free reign. Also a lot of room for flankers. There's a little health pack room here which people often don't look through. And I'll just walk you guys through that. So if you come around this side, there's a little alley here that you can come from. and this health pack room here has a mega health pack. Makes for an excellent place for flankers to go from. So again, as a Winston dive comp, you can kind of take the real estate here, use this as natural cover to see where the enemy is coming from. Then you can set up your dive. If they're coming down main, you can jump them here. If they go on the point, then you rotate and you just get your team to go in. You can come from the high ground and drop down, or you can come from here, or you can come from underneath. And really, like I said, you have a lot more options with the dive comp. But I would say both are equally viable on this map. It really depends what the people in your team are comfortable playing, what are their strongest heroes, and what your strongest comp is. So downtown, probably the more balanced of the three maps on Busan. And finally, moving on to the third map on Busan, that is MEKA Base, which is where Diva and her friends call home. Now, there's only really one word to describe this map, what's best on it, and what works, and that is goats. That's right, guys, I know you hate it, but this is probably one of the most goats-centric maps in the entire of the Overwatch pool. And I'm about to explain the reasons why. So when the enemy attackers are coming in, there's only three places they can come from. This one here, and this one here. And what you'll notice is they're all narrow doorways, which can be easily blocked off. And that essentially explains why goats is so dominant on this map pool. Because if you can get control of the map, you can essentially dominate all three of these exits and make it nearly impossible for the enemy team to come through you without a really massive fight and without a big investment. So let me just explain how you'd go about doing that. So coming out of the spawn doors, you really want to go with a goats comp, which I really recommend you play, guys. I'll give you an alternative, but I really recommend you go with goats. Coming out of spawn, you want to go this right side because it's the quickest route to face the enemy, and again it's a very narrow point. So you want to go down the right. If the enemy team also comes right, you'll eventually meet them somewhere here, and that's where you brawl it out. And then standard goats v goats meta resumes. You want to burn the enemy Reinhardt as quickly as you can. If they go left, then you have a couple options. You can either retreat to one of the safe angles, so for example here, where you go all the way around and you go left as well. Or alternatively, you just speed into them, guys. If you're coming here, they come left. Provided your whole team is grouped up, you just speed onto them, you brawl, and again, goats resumes. Now once the fight is over, you drop down a point, cap the point, and from that point on, your job is basically to dominate the three choke points that people come from. And the way you do that, you take your team, you set up on this high ground here because this is where most teams come through. This is the natural entrance from the spawn point. You set up the bulk of your team here, and you have your Reinhardt or your off tank just watching down this corridor here. If they're coming here, great, everybody shifts up their position, holds this little window, and you make it really hard for them to come through. Then you want to kind of set up one of your supports, preferably your Lucio, somewhere in this region. Now the reason you do this is that the Lucio essentially wants to peek this angle here and listen out for footsteps from underneath. So while the Lucio watches, or it could be an Ana as well, guys, because the Ana can sit at this range and be quite comfortable. But Lucio's better because he can get out of trouble much easier. But essentially, you sit your support down here, and they're watching this route. Your support spots the enemy team coming from this side. You guys all rotate from here, and you hold this area here. Again, easy choke point, nothing much to worry about. And should you hear footsteps coming from down here, again, your team can all come down here, hold this choke. So just by setting up in the space of these two boxes, essentially, you can make sure that you have complete control over where the enemy team is coming from. There's literally no other way for them to come. So you can really abuse the fact that your comp is so good at brawling by forcing the team into these three narrow chokes and forcing them to take a bad fight to try and get through you. And usually if you can get map control on this point in particular, you're really going to force the enemy to at least commit some really big ults to try and get through you. So map control first here is really important. Now there is one thing I've neglected to mention, and this is one for all you goats haters out there, for people who maybe just despise playing goats, or you just want to play that anti-goats comp and make it work. This high ground here is basically the defining factor if you don't want to run goats. This is where it's going to define the game essentially. So what this high ground does is it allows you to set up a sort of crossfire, guys. And the way you do this is, let's say for example the enemy team is running goats and they're set up on point here. Now essentially you want to put someone like a soldier or a McCree even, but preferably soldier. Soldier's great here. Then you want to get your other DPS and maybe your Ana up here, and your tanks are setting up, one side. Essentially from that point on, you're just raining damage down, you're just spamming damage down, because the goats comp just cannot contest this really easily. And what you're waiting for, guys, is some sort of big move to happen. So if the Ana can land a big anti-nade on the goats comp, that's the time your Winston drops down, your D.Va drops down, and they brawl. If either of them gets low, easy for them to jump back up to the high ground, back into the loving arms of their support. And essentially you can use this to punish an unorganized goats comp by just abusing these two high grounds and making sure that the Reinhardt shield can only cover one angle at a time. So whichever angle he isn't covering is going to get spammed down from. Now the reason that even this isn't great is that a coordinated goats comp can counter this quite easily. And the reason for that is you just want to get your Lucio to speed boost you through one of these two sides, fight half of the team while the other half is on the other side, and essentially you take a 3v6 or a 2v6, and it's quite easy to deal with. But in your solo queue games, you might be able to use these positions to really abuse the high ground and punish an uncoordinated team. So to summarize, guys, Sanctuary, the most wide open of the three maps. The control point is exposed on all four sides, so bear that in mind whenever you're trying to hold it. Dive comps work best, and you can go down the middle route or go down that open side. Fat comps should go down that narrow pathway, but be warned, guys, that you're really easily outmaneuvered when you get onto the point. As I mentioned, those four exposed sides can really leave you punished. So if you're going to go for the fat comp, be very organized and speed around together. If you're going for a dive comp, just exploit those angles, get those flanks going. Sombra, Soldier, Widow, Doomfist, all these DPS really thrive. They really make good use of those multiple flank angles. Downtown, the most balanced of the three maps, because you can pretty much run goats and dive, whichever takes your fancy. If you go dive, you want to fight in that courtyard, try and get your Widow on the ledge, try and use the high ground. And if you're running goats, go down that narrow side, sit up on point, turtle in that little hole I told you about, and just try and cover the angles and brawl whenever you see them get too close. Finally, MEKA Base, goats. Just go goats, guys. Hold the chokes. Use the setup I explained where you have your support, listen out for the footsteps and watch one side while the rest of your team watches the other side, and just make sure that the enemy team doesn't come through for free. Make them commit lots of ults when they're trying to come through. And if you really hate goats, it is my job as an analyst to give you another option. So get those high grounds, set up that crossfire, get that fat nade, get that EMP in, and then you collapse on top of them. And try and exploit that uncoordinated solo queue goats comp. So that's all I got for today, guys. Hope you found this video helpful, because I know a lot of you are really confused about Busan with it being the newest map in the pool. So hopefully this gave you a few insights on how to play it. As always, if you learned something new or if you enjoyed the video, please do like, share and subscribe. It really does help. And I am accepting VOD reviews, so if you do have a VOD you'd like me to take a look at, please do send it my way. My Discord's in my About section, I'll put it underneath this video as well. And please do try and send me a video of a hero or a map I haven't done yet, because I'd quite like to get through the entire hero pool before I start going over heroes again and again. So if you have a VOD with a hero I haven't done yet, do send it my way and I'll try and get to it. And I'll be back before you know, guys, another video. I'm SVB, and I'll see you guys soon.